Hello, everyone. This is the Improvement Season podcast. I did just screw up and introduce it as Revive to Stage, but that has now ended. And we will transition into that again when either me or Pascal compete. But we are no longer reviving to stage. We are now in our improvement season, which is super exciting. And we are both very excited to get into that. And we're going to talk about... Hello, Pascal. Sorry, I need to actually introduce my friend who is also here. How's it going?
Hello. Yeah, everything's good.
Awesome.
Please continue.
So we will be talking about what the improvement season means, why is it called the improvement season, how is it different to an off-season, and how me and Pascal are going to be like setting ours up and how we think maybe you should in future as well. So I think, first of all, I will give it over to Pascal to talk about what an improvement season is. How does it differ to an off-season? And actually, before I just let Pascal roll off, I want to say thank you to everyone who gave us name suggestions. We did read through all of them. We thought long and hard. We laughed at a lot of them. And we gave thumbs up to many of them. And we really appreciate the input from you guys. But the reason we wanted to go with the improvement season is we wanted to make sure the podcast was specific to something and people could see it and realize what that is. Also, you're going to discover exactly what the improvement season is and why it's so important to us and why we wanted to have that as the overriding title. So yeah, go for it, Pascal.
Yes, thank you very much for the lovely introduction. And here I am, yeah. So I speak up now. And so for me, I'm also using the term off-season. So just to put it out there, there's nothing wrong with actually calling it an off-season. I think this is a term that is thrown around, and also like peaking, like contest prep, is just a staple already. But for me, the connotation behind the name off implies to not be having a plan, not being focused on a specific goal, right? And improvement season is and has a certain intention behind it. It is to actually improve. And us as bodybuilders, we want to improve specific parts in our physique and our performance, because the performance for us is stepping on stage and presenting that there. So I think that having that as a overall name for the entire off season, right, is that you have a positive connotation with it, that you're trying to have a certain goal, that you're trying to still improve for the next season to set yourself up for a successful contest prep, even though it might be coming up first in the next 2 or 3 years from now on. It still has a positive connotation to it, instead of being off of something and not having a plan, not having a structure, and being off plan and having a period where it's not about contest prep. Because we've talked about it in the past. I think that the off season and the let's call it from now on improvement season is there to set yourself up for a successful contest prep. All that you're doing now, like building the habits, also taking some kind of mental and physical break, being a little bit more flexible, because there's a pendulum always swinging back and forth, where on one side there's rigidity, discipline, staying always on track, and on the other side there's more like flexibility and freedom to some extent. That doesn't mean that you're not having control over everything or being on track, but I mean, the pendulum swings back and forth, and when you are closer and closer to stage, then you really need to be disciplined and strict and rigid. Whereas when you're in your off season, you can allow for more flexibility and freedom to then be mentally capable in the future to actually push through those hard times. But again, I mean, the improvement season is still there to actually be on point, have control over all the variables, such as nutrition, such as training, because it is there where you actually make those improvements, which are going to show on stage when contest prep or when the next competition season is around. Because when you don't improve, what's the point in stepping on stage the next time, right? I mean, and this actually explains it pretty well, I think, in my opinion, what an improvement season should be, how it's actually treated, and the connotation that comes along with the name improvement season over the off season.
No, yeah, I think that was a brilliant kind of differentiating factor. It's not like they are two separate things or anything. We haven't come up with a new phase for a bodybuilder. It's literally just the connotations that are brought behind being off and then versus improvement. It just really cements what this period of time is. It's kind of like the difference between people saying like, oh, I'm having a cheat meal versus having a refeed. Like just framing it as a cheat meal sounds wrong. Like if you frame it as a refeed, then that's much better. And that's assuming the person's doing the same thing. And in either scenario, they're increasing their carbs, calories, they're not just actually just fucking it and having a cheat meal. So when we talk about off season and improvement season, we're hoping people are taking them to be one and the same thing. But I think some people in their off seasons, they do. As soon as they finish competing, fuck this, it's off. I'm off. Like I'm going on holiday. I'm like no longer a bodybuilder. No, you're always a bodybuilder. You're always working towards your next performance on stage. And like you rightly said, I think for you to have a successful actual contest prep phase or season, it's cemented upon the improvement season, because everything you do away from the stage is actually setting the stage for the actual stage. It's kind of like if you think about business projects or even at school, much easier example, you're doing your studies, you're going to your lectures, you're revising, and then you do your exam. It's not like you're off and then on, like when you start revising for exams, like you're peaking for your exams. No, you'll do it, all the hard work's actually already done. And now you're just gathering all that, you're cementing it in your head, and then you're presenting it to the paper. It's the same for a bodybuilder. You've done all your hard work, and then you're just trimming off some of the fat, and so you can present the best package on stage. So I do think, I mean, you can look worse contest prep to contest prep if you don't have a good off season or improvement season. So it is all about, I mean, it, like you said, it's multifaceted. It's not just your training, it's not just your nutrition, but it's also your mental mindset. Because if you do, you can't continue being a contest prep bodybuilder mindset throughout the year unless you've got like no life, basically. And that might sound a bit harsh to some people that like live for bodybuilding, but remember, bodybuilding really is a hobby, or at least for the majority of the population, it should be a hobby. Like we're not all big, massive Olympia guys who need to live bodybuilding. It should probably be part of who we are, not who we are. And so, it takes a side step, and maybe like as a percentage of our life, it reduces to like 25% rather than like 60, 70, 80% as when we're in contest prep. There has to be that flexibility of all of those life factors. And I think that actually makes you a better bodybuilder, because you become less obsessive, less stressed. You kind of just go through the process. And actually, I guess I can transfer this back to you, Pascal. We can kind of talk about the process of like the contest off season, the improvement season. Like, what makes a good improvement season? Like, what are people doing during that time to improve? How can you actually get better year to year? I mean, people obviously know muscle mass building, not getting too fat. But if you want to talk about kind of the steps that a bodybuilder can take during their improvement season to make the most out of it, maybe also, or I guess we can come on to length afterwards, but that might come out as well.
That's a broad one. That's a really broad one.
Just basically
where to start? I mean, we've talked about it in the last episode already, how to transition out of a contest prep. And I think it starts there. The improvement season starts there, because just to go back on the connotation of off, when you're off, you're not improving anymore. You take time off and you're not doing anything good, or especially you're not working towards your goals. So the improvement season and improving yourself actually starts from the beginning of you stopping the contest prep, or you finish your contest prep, right? And first, it's all about getting as quickly up to a healthy body fat percentage, or to a healthy state in general, so that you can make those improvements, so that the body is in a state where it actually is comfortable in producing performance output, put on muscle mass, along with, of course, some fluff along the way. However, when we talk about not getting too overly fat, and this is something many people, many athletes struggle with, coming from the contest prep, not having a specific goal in mind anymore. And this is where you should, for yourself, set the next goals. it could be some short-term goals, but also long-term goals. The long-term goals, however, are really hard to keep in mind and always to be focused on. Especially the longer something is away, the more likely it is that we fall off wagon, because it's so hard to imagine the outcome in 2 to 3 years to 4 years to 5 years. This is also the reason why people always try to find the magic pill and a quick solution, because it's way more easier to imagine the outcome when it's in a short-term process. But thinking about the next 5 years, the next 10 years, it's so hard to imagine. But it is important that once you've actually ended your contest prep season, or competition season, that you first and foremost get healthy again with a plan, with a structure, and also immediately set the next goals for yourself. Of course, I don't want the people to get overly obsessed with always having some kind of meticulous structure they need to follow, but having a goal will keep you accountable for yourself, and also following a specific route and staying on track. Because if you don't have a plan in front of you, it's so easy to actually rationalize and justify certain things, such as overeating. Then you're saying for yourself, it's all right because I'm first stepping on stage in 5 years from now. I can get a little bit more fluffy, but this then becomes a habit, and those habits are then so hard to actually reverse again. And also, I think it was AJ who talked about the athletes who get overly fat right after the competition. I can see that there's a point to some people actually doing it, because some people, the body fat set point where they feel healthy, where the performance is increased, is a little bit higher than for others. So I don't think that for everyone it is kind of fucked up to actually go to that body fat percentage as quickly as possible. But if you gain body fat too quickly, you're not really setting yourself up for a successful improvement season. And it is so easy to actually cut down. Being stage ready is a different thing, but to actually lose a little bit of fluff, looking good. But to build muscle, it is like a long-term process. And when you are always gaining too quickly, accumulating fat too quickly, then you cut down. You will always lose a little bit of muscle mass while you're cutting down, and thus you could end up spinning your wheels with gaining too quickly fat. You want to strip it off, lose a little bit of muscle mass along the way, and then this is the cycle where all the people are, well, not all the people, but many people are stuck in, that they don't improve their body composition simply because they are actually gaining too quickly, accumulating too much fat too quickly, and then they strip off or try to strip off that fat, lose a little bit of muscle mass along with it, and they always stay at the same point, right? So I'm going off tangent a little bit, but
I think you've made some good points there, though. I think the real take home from that should be that during your improvement season, the majority of the time you should be out of a diet. You should not be dieting. There should be, maybe, as we'll talk about, I'm sure, in future episodes and things, intermittent mini cuts, primer phases, maintenance periods. But the majority of the time, you're a bodybuilder. You should be building up, building muscle mass. And then there's a fine line at the pace you do that, because like you've talked about the side of the coin of people doing it too fast, getting too fluffy too fast, and then having to cut too often. And then that's not building anything. You're kind of maintaining at best. And then there's the other side of the coin where you flip it and you go, people will be like, oh, okay, if I go too fast, it's terrible. So I go really, really slow. And then there be the other side of the coin where they just don't change. And I've been at both, and probably most people have been at both. And the best place to be in your improvement season is dead in the middle, right? Especially at Revive Stronger. Like, we look at so many different experts. We talk to so many different people on the podcast. And quite often we're collating all of their stuff, coming to consensus as a pair between where we like to go. And very often we're like, you know what, the middle ground sounds pretty productive. It sounds pretty good. And you know, if they're experts, that you're probably getting a good kind of mix of both approaches if you are trying to go down the middle. Yeah. So I mean, I can't think of many people that for elite naturals recommend going and building what am I trying to say, gaining weight very, very quickly. And likewise, no one really says to go super duper slow. There's people that are slightly slower, Eric Helms. There's people that are slightly quicker, Mike Israetel. And then you have to kind of suit where the person, like, where do they actually do better? Maybe actually you kind of go between a bit of both. Like sometimes I know I might aim to gain quicker and I end up gaining slower, or I aim to gain slower and I end up gaining quicker. But as long as you're like somewhere here and you're not getting really fat really quick, or you're not just staying the same, I think that's important. And you have to know yourself as an individual. I was actually talking to my friend yesterday. This is me just coming
friends?
Friend, I have a friend, and this is the first time I'd seen him since like a few months before my contest prep. And so I was already, it was really nice. I was in a position where I'm already 3 weeks post show and I feel very flexible that I can go and be a normal person now, which is great. And I was talking to him about this, and I've completely forgotten what we were talking about. You threw me off saying I only had one friend.
Sorry. Sorry for that.
I've literally can't remember what I was talking about. Here we go. Sorry. Personally, I know myself, I get very comfortable, and a lot of people will relate to this with homeostasis. The body likes, like we talked about, those set points or settling points. It likes being it. Like it likes what it's got. So if you don't provide enough of a stimulus for change, it will not adapt. It won't have to force itself. And like I'll always train hard. But the thing I won't necessarily do is really push food. And I know for myself personally, I have to. Otherwise, my body just kind of takes it in and it gets comfortable. And I find myself, I get very happy eating a lot of food because I can eat a lot of food and maintain weight. And I feel just nice. Like I'm like, oh, gym performance is okay. Like I can push hard in the gym. But I'm like, Steve, your actual physique isn't changing because you're not putting the stress of nutritional stress there. Like I know people talk about the fact you can maintain and just gain muscle. But I find for myself, it might be because I'm a certain level of advancement. It might be my genetic makeup. But if I just maintain weight and push hard in the gym, it's not enough. I need to almost force feed a little bit to make sure that I'm gaining on the scale, gaining visually, because I'll get complacent. I'll spin my wheels, and it's so easy to do. And I think there'll be people out there listening who are maybe a bit adipophobia. They don't like gaining fat, and then they get comfortable and they're like, oh, maybe I'm just gaining a little bit of muscle and I'm maintaining weight and I'm recomping. It's like, no, you're probably not. You're probably not. Or maybe you are, but it's so hard to tell. So I think that was a slight side tangent, but the take home was the majority of your off season, your improvement season should be gaining, building. And if you go too fast out of the gates or at any time during your off season and have to cut too soon, you're cutting yourself short. And it's easy to do straight out of the gates after your contest prep because people can just rebound. And then they're like, oh, I've got to that point at which I'm no longer sensitive because of my high body fat percentage. I actually feel uncomfortable now and I have to cut down. That I've put myself like, I've already cut my off season short. I have to cut.
But the thing is, though, and this is something I think people really overestimate, the insulin sensitivity. It isn't like you are over, let's say, 15% of body fat, because this is a number that has been thrown around all the time, that when you are above 15%, you need to cut down because you're not as insulin sensitive anymore. But it isn't really like you're not insulin sensitive at all anymore. You're still you're still able to actually gain some muscle mass. You are still able to actually perhaps perform better, and perhaps it could be that you are feeling way better above 15% in the let's I hate really throwing around body fat percentages because it really doesn't show and tell you how you perform, where you're at. And body fat percentages are really so different between individuals. But let's just say with the numbers that are thrown around, between 15 and 20%, it could be the spot where you are actually performing your best, right? I take a good example. Let's say Bryce Lewis. He is a strength athlete. I know that. But when he went from the 93 kilogram weight class to the 105 kilogram weight class, his performance just skyrocketed. Like it was insane, his progress. And now he's crushing the 105s with a higher body fat percentage, right? And this could be you in the gym as well when it comes to the performance output, and thus leading to more hypertrophy stimulus, right? Because, I mean, yes, perhaps you are 2 to 3 to 5% above the body fat percentage, which is like the norm in the 12 to 15% range. But perhaps this is the optimum range for you to be in to actually have the highest performance output in terms of recovery, in terms of strength, in terms of hypertrophic stimulus, all those kind of things. So I think this is really individual, and you shouldn't really be too focused on the numbers itself, but actually take a look at your performance and the visual assessment. And it could be that you're not seeing your six-pack anymore, but when your performance is skyrocketing, instead of keeping kind of a visual six-pack, feeling somehow good, knowing that you're in the range of 12 to 15%, but actually your performance isn't increasing, you can be quite certain that this isn't the optimum place to be in for you, because you want to push it harder. You want to actually have the capacity of recovering well. And I think that for some individuals, this body fat set point might be then a little bit higher.
I think what people have to remember is that, like, when we talk about these general recommendations, I think it was James Krieger and Brett Contreras did a brilliant article on Brett's website talking about kind of digging into data. And when we report averages, when we report means, there's people at either end of this bell curve. So whilst most people, and we can generalize and give a general recommendation that most people should be between probably 10 to 15% is the best range for kind of insulin sensitivity and muscle growth, there'll be people that will be below it, and there'll be people that will be above it. There might be, I don't know where there'd be more, but for someone like Alberto Nunez, he does stay leaner in his off season. It might be related to his training age. It might be it's definitely related to his genetics. But he's found he doesn't need to push his body fat percentage very high, which is actually probably favorable for a bodybuilder, because that just allows him to cut for less time. Whereas there might be guys who are needing to go higher, like Bryce Lewis, and that might mean that he's actually better suited to a different sport, to bodybuilding, because bodybuilding requires shreds, and it might mean that because his performance is so good here, he might build his best muscle mass there, but then when he has to cut down stage, it's just a different scenario to throw at someone, when like it could actually be part of what makes a good bodybuilder is how comfortable they can be being lean. I think being comfortable and finding getting lean easier makes you a better bodybuilder. It's just part of the whole thing. Like, people talk about, oh, you don't have the genetics for bodybuilding and stuff, and I think something I've got in my favor is I can stay a bit leaner and it isn't a struggle for me, and that probably favors me getting to stage because I can get that much more conditioned. But who knows, there's just an element that I think is interesting to throw out there. And also, when we're talking about it, not only is there performance recovery aspects, and this probably comes into that, but when you are a bit fatter, when you don't have to like worry about like, oh, am I going to like get really hungry when I'm out? Do I need to get these steps in? Like all these stresses. Like when you are a bit fatty, you don't have to worry about so much of those things when you let yourself just go a little bit, if that makes sense. And it's much more maintainable. Whereas if you're trying to maintain something that your body doesn't really like to maintain, like a leaner body weight, you have to put on a stress on yourself. Like, oh, I have to remember to do this many steps a day. I'll have to do this cardio. I have to kind of make sure I eat high volume food so I don't end up getting hungry and eating over my calories. Whereas if you let those go, you get that stress out and you go here and you get a bit fatter maybe, which is a cost, but the benefit might be so much worth it because now you've got all that extra kind of thought and stress to go towards your training, your performance, your recovery. And that's something for me, is something I have to think about in my off season, because I know I do, and I'm just out of contest prep, so obviously they're going to be there a little bit, but I think sometimes I do stress too much about those things and it holds me back in other elements, so I don't even realize it because stress is stress.
Yeah, and I think that now we've talked a lot about fat, and nowadays I have the feeling that people are actually super afraid of fat and that there is a negative connotation to fat itself. But keep in mind, fat is actually essential for survival. right? And also for health outcomes, for hormone production, for cholesterol production, all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, it's mandatory to function well. I mean, and thus, I think that it is absolutely okay to go to a specific body fat range, even though that once you've been lean, you will always compare yourself to that image, right? To that you of being lean, being shredded, because this is the best you've ever looked like. But the thing is, in terms of the rewards coming out of it, it's only, yeah, you look good, but are there any other benefits to it? Mostly not. I mean, you're not feeling great. Your mood is like shit all the time. Your food focus, your performance is down the drain most of the time. All those kind of things. I mean, I just came against my cable there. All those kind of things are not really great to be in. So you should allow for that improvement season to. We've talked about the mental and the physiological break, and I think that plays a role in it as well. Even though you might not feel super comfortable in your skin because you're holding a little bit more fluff, this is as you already mentioned right now, something you should consider actually doing, because the rewards you're getting out of being a little bit more fluffy are potentially better than staying on the leaner end all the time, especially if you want to improve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to consider the cost. It's kind of like, it is like the cost of bulking. If you want to gain muscle, it's a cost to have the extra fluff. It's kind of like, if you want to improve in your job at work, then you're going to have to put in extra time, extra kind of hours at work. And then you've got other costs. So you might end up a cost of less sleep, or you might have the cost of not being able to go on a date with a girl, or there's other costs involved. Whenever you want to improve in one area of your life, there's other things that have to go down. Or like in training, if you want to grow bigger muscles, you might have the cost of losing some of your kind of short-term like strength, because obviously it's neurological strength losses, but I don't want to get too far into that. You're not actually losing, if you're building muscle, you're not going to lose actual strength. Or like when you do go through like the primer phases, the low volume phases, where you're again kind of resensitizing the pathways to hypertrophy, you're short term losing some like acute hypertrophy from like the muscle swelling and from the pump work that you've been doing. You'll look smaller, but that is a cost for the overall long-term benefit. So like you said, like you have these short-term goals, you have to keep a long-term mindset as well, and kind of having a plan, I think, is super duper helpful for your off season. I think the thing I've had the mistake of doing before is kind of, I just had in my mind, I need to just train hard and just slowly build muscle. Whereas when I've actually used a bit of a powerlifter type mindset and like periodize things, so it's like, right, Steve, you have this plan, you're going to mass for 3 mesocycles. You're then going to take a primer phase, hold that, low volumes, you're going to maintain weight, and then you're going to go through a mini cut, strip that off, set you up again, so you're nice and kind of lean, insulin sensitive, and all those things. So then you've got another 3-month period of massing. And by having that kind of systematic, like phase potentiated approach, already I'm in a way better place than thinking, oh, I just have to do like, just a pure example of what I used to like think in myself. I was just like, I'm going to do daily undulating periodization, which even in itself is not the right way to use it. But I was like, I'm going to have these strength days, I'm going to have these hypertrophy days, and all I'm going to do is the exact same microcycle workout and just look to progress loads every single week forever, and just make sure my scale weight's going up. And that was just not enough. Like, I think for someone who's like novice, intermediate, that approach can definitely work, and you can focus and you can build a lot via that approach. But for someone who's more advanced, you need a bit more of structure, a bit more of a longer term mindset and plan, because building muscle takes longer anyway, so you do need that longer foresight.
I think also on that note, being a bodybuilder is in general a periodized approach to everything. So when we take a structured approach to programming, for example, right, we have macrocycle, we have mesocycle, we have microcycles, all that kind of approaches to, or those blocks that play together with each other, right? And I think that for bodybuilding, it's the same thing. Overall, there we have the bodybuilder, and then we have specific mental periodization as well. You've talked about it in the past that at a certain point you were the bodybuilder in contest prep, where the only focus was to get the best physique as possible, where it's not about the performance in the gym anymore, where it's not about the strength levels, where you accepted that perhaps your strength levels will be dropping in the gym, where you won't be able to do the super heavy compound lifts anymore because the risk reward was simply too high for getting injured along the way. And now you will switch your mindset and mentality about training and nutritional aspects again in actually focusing on the performance aspect, implementing more heavy compound lifts, going sometimes in those strength areas as well, trying to still have a focus on the physique, but it's not about only the physique levels, but more so when the performance is actually good, you can expect that your physique is being improved as well along the way, right?
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely think to be the best in any aspect for anything, I guess you periodize everything. Mike has just said it before, you periodize everything. And that goes, we've done infographics on periodizing like food selection, periodizing your caffeine intake, periodizing, again, like you said, your mindset. Like you need to go from being quite strict and kind of focusing on very much physique and posing, and then that all kind of dissipates and you focus more on performance, how's kind of things feeling in the gym, and less on how am I looking and that sort of thing. And that will allow you to grow. And that's a really good way of getting out of the kind of fat phobic mindset as well, because you do look less at your physique. And there was a great discussion, in fact, in our coaching group where, so I can't remember who it was, but someone talks about how he's recently just purchased like long sleeve tops and like hoodies and baggy stuff to wear in the gym over his kind of physique. And it's not like we don't let our athletes get really fat or anything like that. Certainly not. But in his head, he's fluffier and fatter than he'd like to be. So by wearing this stuff, he doesn't even look at his physique in the mirror. And it's something I'm definitely thinking about now, because as I'm transitioning out, I am still looking at myself in the mirror, catching myself, like, oh, the tricep feathers are still there, brilliant. I'm like, Steve, when the fuck do you need tricep feathers right now? You don't. What you need is strong, massive, chunky triceps. So they might not look great in the mirror, well, they sound great, but they might not really look as good. They might not look as cool when they're contracting, but the performance, focus on that. So I need to kind of maybe get some big hoodies, and maybe we'll get some bigger Revive hoodies and shit that we can wear in the gym, and some trappies, because that would be awesome. But I think, the mindset of focusing less on physique, more on performance, and then going from performance to more on physique is a good one, because it happens both ways. When you're in your off season, you focus on your physique and you're like, shit, I don't look as lean as I'd like to. When you're in your contest prep, you're shredded, but you're like, oh man, I'm a weak pussy. Like the grass is always greener, isn't it? So
yeah. And I mean, the thing is that actually as a bodybuilder, you only have what's it called? Totally forgot it. No, as a bodybuilder, your only goal should be to be shredded when competition season is around. Other than that, you have not really any business of having striated glutes or a Christmas tree year round. I mean,
Christmas only comes once.
Yeah, totally. Or not even once. But when you're really a true bodybuilder and not a Instagram famous type of guy or anything like that, or someone who earns money with his looks, who always needs to be on the leaner side, I think that, again, the term bodybuilder comes into play. And you have no business actually staying that lean. If you really want to improve and keep longevity in mind, it's a marathon and not a sprint, as cheesy as it might sound. But I mean, you want to improve and get better and better, and then you really need to have those times where you might not look like the biggest guy or the most shredded dude around, but when the time comes where that actually counts, And this is only in competition season and only on show date where it really counts. It's like every single athlete, when competition date is around, this is where your performance should be the highest. Right? And the same applies to a bodybuilder. You don't really need to be peaked for your performance in the improvement season.
No.
Or when your show is coming up in 2 years from now. You don't really need to perform your best then at that given time. And performance is in that regard actually being shredded and all that kind of stuff. But you want to have the best performance when it's really needed. And that is when show data is around.
It's the exact same, like the parallels to powerlifting are so key, like so obvious here. A powerlifter performs their best 1 rep max on the platform, hopefully. But then when they're miles away from needing to perform that 1 rep max, their 1 rep max on that given day is probably pants, because they're probably very fatigued from all the training that's actually going to allow them the best peaked performance down there. It's like the same with a bodybuilder, right? Like they're their most shredded on stage. They're not their most shredded away from stage, but that position there, that lots of hypertrophy work, they might have more muscle there, which is actually going to allow for a better peaked performance, a better shredded package later in down the line. No, it's really interesting. And for me, actually, I'd ask the viewers, but if there's anything they particularly want from me, because obviously I'm just coming away from stage now, but also from Pascal, is I intend to still try and share physique shots. So like I'll still get into my mandatory poses now and then, or like I'll still try and do a few kind of like nudes, almost like not nudes, like progress photos, because not only does that keep me accountable, I think it's important to share, like I think like we talked about before, bear mode, like kind of share that. And I'm very uncomfortable about it, but by sharing it, I think it'll make me more comfortable. And then if I can do that, I know I can help other people feel more comfortable about it, because I know I've got a few fond followers who are similar to myself, and they kind of, I think I help them in that way feel kind of better about their situation, because it just makes it more relatable. Because I think both of us are very relatable. Like we've said, we're kind of average Joes. We're not like genetic elites or anything. We work freaking hard. We kind of do everything we can to be as optimal as possible. But at the end of the day, we're still people, and we're not kind of got those crazy physiques. So I'm not sure I've got anything else to say.
Neither do I, if you have anything to say.
I think we really kind of pinpointed what an improvement season is, why we think calling this podcast the improvement season gives a great connotation to the word rather than a negative one that potentially off-season could. As a bodybuilder, we're always in season, right? We're always building towards the stage in future. So we could always call it revived stage, and someone commented that, in fact. Yeah. But we are going to not be on stage, potentially for me, not till 2020, for you, maybe not next year, maybe the year after, maybe the year after that.
I really thought about it. I just can give a small update on that one. I really thought about it, and I think that 2019 will be the year where I'm actually will be competing, simply because I'm graduating next year. So it really falls into the time where I'm in the middle of my prep, which I really don't like. I want to get the best out of my graduation. This is why I'm visiting school now, to actually get the highest degree and the best outcome. And I don't want it to interfere with each other, because both will then interfere with each other. So this, and also, I'm not entirely sure what is happening after the graduation, if I'm going to move to London, and all those kind of things. University, I don't know, all the things are unclear what is happening after the graduation, but again, this would interfere with each other. And I think that when looking at my physique now, I still have a lot of muscle mass to build, and I'd rather take the next year as well to really build a solid foundation to then step on stage and feeling satisfied with myself. Because right now I could imagine that even if I would manage to get down to really shredded levels, I wouldn't be as satisfied as when I would have taken the time to actually build much more muscle mass. And this is, I think, the best thing for me also to set myself up after this crappy year of 2017 in terms of health and also, in terms of my overall performance. And I think that 1 year where I'm just focusing on improving myself is the way to go to then step on stage in 2019.
Yeah, it sounds like the wise thing to do, and I hope it doesn't make me tempted to also do 2019, because it's funny, people have asked me like, oh, you competing next year and things. I'm like, what? Like, why would I do that? The judges' feedback was that I nailed the process. I came dice to stage. I presented myself really well. So I did everything I could have. They're just like, for his frame, he needs more muscle mass. I'm not going to build very much muscle in a year, and it's not a year. Like, there's periods of time in that year where I'm certainly not gaining muscle, and then you have to set yourself up not to get too fat, blah, blah, blah. Basically, no way am I competing next year. It's certainly not going to be until probably earliest 2020. If I'm realistic, I want to be able to come back with, again, a noticeably different physique. I want to come back and present a phenomenal package that I can be very proud of, and hopefully contend for first place rather than, well, I still think if you come top 3, you're contending for first place. But I want to be winning that gold. I don't want to be taking third. I want to be right in there battling. So that's where things lay for us. And I guess all we'd ask as viewers is please stay tuned. Please ask questions, or if there's topics that sound interesting to you or you've heard come up in social media that you'd like our viewpoint on, then please let us know. Otherwise, we will just be picking and going through kind of updates on how we're doing, and then things we've seen that we think are worthwhile to discuss. Because this is going to be a long term now. We don't intend to stop the Improvement Season podcast.
Absolutely not.
And we might bring other guests on again, like we had Luke and AJ on. We might look to bring on some other guests, see how they're doing, get their ideas on certain topics or ideas on certain viewpoints. So yeah, a bright future, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, you name it.
So that is the Improvement Season podcast. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you soon.
Catch you soon.